innovation. What does it mean? It's come to mean hope, technology progress, so cell phones, satellites. And we see and understand the impacts. So penicillin saved many lives. And we have the absolutely, essential sticky note. And also economic impact. So here's some stats for you. This is from a Harvard Business Review article. So Fortune 100 fastest growing companies, right? There's a sector, or there's companies you can call category creators. So they create something so new and different, it's its own category. So this list of 100 fastest growing US companies, out of 100, 13% were category creators, but they made up 53% of revenue and 74% of capitalization incremental growth. So, a big impact, right? And I think what gets hidden behind these impacts, and the impacts and also the outcomes, the impacts, and the technology, right? We miss sight of a fact, and it's something that it's a hidden, behind the shadow, it's like a hidden nature of innovation. And we lose sight of it, but I think it's really insightful to get at or understand. And it's that innovating is a creative act. It's a creative act, and that makes it a bit of a journey or an adventure. So let me explain. Let me walk you through this. So there's many things going on in innovation. So innovation, the adoption of something new, it has two parts and both are hard. Adoption and something new. So you have to do two things to make it work. You have to create something new that's useful, but it also has to be adoption, right? And what's the creative act? It's about connecting things together. You connect things together to do this. So Rockefeller made a lot of, most famous person in history, connected, so oil business, but connected it with rail, which were both new at the time. So here's something people need, and how do you get it to where people are? So you got to really think about two things, right? There's two different mindsets. So how do you create something? How do you make something? And why, what do people need? And how are you going to get it to them? So it's about connecting different things together. So like 3M with a sticky note, first they stumbled across this glue with a different property, right? They knew that it worked well for paper connecting together, and they created the sticky note, which was a big hit for 3M. So what makes this an adventure, so innovating an adventure, is that there's obstacles. And if you're innovating, there's two fundamental types of obstacles. So one is uncertainty. So you're doing something nobody's ever done before. You're going to bump into things that nobody's seen. So here's an example. In the US, they were trying to break the sound barrier to make better military aircraft. And as they approached the speed of sound, the planes started shaking apart. Right? They painted the planes orange so they could find all the parts if they crashed. So it's serious business. What they didn't know, and they had to stumble into this, was that as you reach the speed of sound, there's a shock wave that forms around the plane. And anything in that shock wave, like wings, gets ripped off, right? They had to bump into this, understand it, then adapt. They knew that, okay, we have to have swept wings, keep it out of the shock wave. And there's also, say, market risk. So during the dot-com boom, right, a lot of people, VCs put money into startups, trying to do the new internet businesses during the dot-com boom. But a lot of the markets weren't there. The market wasn't there then, right? So they didn't know, and they bet wrong. But the second obstacle, I think, is more interesting. So it's a more interesting obstacle because people don't normally think about it. And it's this. Uncertainty freaks people out. No, it's just how we're wired. We're wired this way, right? So they've done these studies by shocking people. And they've learned that, okay, if you give somebody a choice between, I'm going to shock you now, or maybe I'm going to shock you later, right? People take the shock now. So the uncertainty of a shock is worse than the shock itself, right? And there's more of these. There's more of these biases. So one is we're wired, humans are wired that we really don't like losing things, more so than a gain. So the factor is about 2, right? So if you're going to risk something, the gain has to be about double that before it becomes attractive. So we're not wired necessarily to take risks, right? Which can be part of innovating. Need to conform. So we have a wired-in need to fit in and to follow group norms. It's just how we are. I think it helps with harmony, right? Some argue that schools teach conformity over creativity. This is interesting, though. This is behavioral economics, and it's a cognitive bias. So this stands for what you see is all there is. So what this means is that you have facts and opinions in your mind, right? And your mind automatically fits a narrative to that automatically. And that's your view, or that's your opinion. And the bias is you don't consider that, there's probably a lot of things I don't actually know, and there's probably a better scenario or story that fits what's going on. So it makes you blind to things, right? If something's outside of your model, you don't necessarily see it. So an example, during the dot-com boom, a status symbol was the Arion chair. So it's that mesh back, what looks like, just a normal fancy office chair now. So it's in museums, and it's known as a breakthrough in industrial design. It's well respected. So when they did the focus groups for the first time, people saw the chair, they sat in it, and they thought, well, when's it going to be done? It looked so different than chairs at the time that people couldn't accept it as, an office chair. It was just too new for people to see it. And there's more of these biases, right? But the point is that innovating, you've got technology, but inside people's minds can be equally as important of a challenge to overcome. So in preparation for this talk, I was reading From Cesspools to Sewers. And it talks about, it's on innovation. It talks about the progress of moving from, we lived in cesspools. So cities, it was a cesspool. The word they used was a lot of filth and stench. And it was normal. We just accepted it. That's just how we live, and everybody was fine with it. It's just normal to us. And it took us a lot of steps to realize, well, maybe we can, live in a better way. So the first, physicians were trying to push for change, and they created these things called death maps. So here's where all the filth and cesspools are, and here's where everybody's dying, and it's the same place. But the attitude at the time was, well, that's still kind of uncertain. Maybe we should just wait and think about this for a bit. Like, seriously. And it got movement. The issue got movement because, sanitation became linked to a class issue. And that was a topic, so it got swept up in another topic. So it's about, people's minds. So 3M, when they invented the sticky, they didn't see the potential or market, right? They didn't initially see it or understand it, and they weren't going to move forward. So you can have something that's a hit or awesome, an idea right under your nose, and it's not obvious, right? So now all these problems, right? So, oh no, what are we going to do? So now we're going to go through some tools. So so I said innovating is a creative act, but it doesn't mean it can't be disciplined. So these are all stolen ideas. So these are all, none of my ideas, it's just different practices all lumped together into convenient TED Talk format for you. So the first tool in innovation is storytelling. So I have PhD engineering, very serious technical training, and I'm saying that the primary tool in innovating is storytelling. So think about it. You're doing a creative act with other people who think in stories. And I think also, I like the line, nothing happens till somebody sells something to somebody. So it's about getting movement or getting people to get it and move forward. Even if you're innovating in government, you're still doing somewhat of a sales process, right? I like the expression, meet them where they are. So use ideas or concepts that people do have in their mind. So in this story, I'm talking about sticky notes. Well, everybody knows a sticky note, right? We can all share a moment and talk about sticky notes. So yeah, you should talk in stories, and even analogies are powerful. So you can get across a lot of information by using analogy of things people know. I got a new startup. It's like Uber for cats, right? You can get the point across in a hurry, and even how you tell the story. Even how you tell the story matters. So here's another bias for you. If something rhymes or sounds like a saying, it comes across as more credible and it's more likely to be believed. So even all this stuff matters. So moving to the second point, right? Innovation, it's the adoption of something new. It has two parts and both are hard. So why and how, right? So adoption and the new thing. So this is so each one of these have their own process, right? So I put down pain. And if you talk to a sales professional, so business development, they're always looking for a customer's pain point. That's the language. They're looking for a pain point. So if you find an issue that's so pressing, it'll jump over all these psychological barriers. But the process is you're looking for a need, you're looking for pain, you're trying to find something that will pull something in that can be adopted. The second process, which will connect to it, is iteration. So if you're doing invention, you're doing design, you're doing product development, it works in doing these little loops. So I like the Edison quote, I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention of 1,000 steps. So you try something, you learn from it, then you try again, and then eventually you figure it out. So you can connect these two things together using a process called Agile. So this is very common in software, product development, high-tech startups. Here's how it works. you have a product owner that's trying to find the customer pain point and understand it. So they'll think, okay, this is what we're trying to solve. Well, here's the product or feature that we think will satisfy that need. Then they'll write it up as a story point. So actually, they'll use the word story. It's a story. That goes to a development team, and that development team will figure out how to build something that satisfies that story point. And then they'll do it in a fixed scope, so trying to do as minimal as possible to get it finished. When they're done, people can try it, and you'll understand more about how and why, and then you do it again. So you're connecting together how and why. So there's an argument you could be made that, okay, well, why always drives how. You figure out what your target, and then you figure out how to do it. So there's a gentleman, Dr. David Ford, did a study of prosthetics. So, he found there were two different types of research labs. So, standalone labs and then practitioners in clinics. What he found was more adoption of people in clinics. So they were better innovators. So they gained insights like a teenage girl doesn't want to have pliers for hands. Like early generation of these things were described as pliers on wires, right? So they got an insight about, well, what do people need? And they could build something that'd be adopted. So you can say, okay, start with why. But it's not so clear, right? So sometimes things start with how, right? So with the Arion chair, the same designers, before they were working on furniture for the elderly, and they were trying to get more airflow, right, for health reasons. Then they took the concepts for that, so these mesh designs, and applied it to office furniture. So with 3M and the sticky note, they were trying to make a super glue. Starting with one Y, let's make a super glue. They failed at that, but they found another how. We have this weird sticky property. Then they used that to come up with a sticky note, right? And then they had a product for offices. So it's a creative process of going back and forth and connecting things together. The next tool is dominoes. So it's working in strategic steps where one sets up the next, sets up the next. So it's good for, say, managing risk. So the classic product development is people do sketches, really cheap, some CAD, computer design models, then a prototype. Each stage, the risk goes down and the budgets can go up and you learn things. So in the space program, before setting up humans, they set up like a monkey and a dog to make sure they figured out keeping things alive in outer space, right, before taking the next step. So you can contain risk. But it can also be market risk. So why did Tesla, they always had the vision of having a sedan, right, mass market sedan, but why did they start with a niche sports car, right? Why didn't they start with golf carts or something? Well, I think if you're going to buy a sedan, it doesn't hurt that Leonardo DiCaprio and George Clooney are driving Tesla sports cars, right? It helps. It's about psychological dominoes, right? Market dominoes. And it depends, and it's creative. So at 3M, when they came up with a sticky, they weren't going to launch it. Like they didn't see the market, they didn't see the potential, they weren't going to launch it. So some enterprising individuals, they made some sticky notes, and they let those out in the loose in the offices at 3M, right? And they took over, right? So it was really clever because you understand why, right? You can test it out, and it's internally, and it's cheap, but you really know, okay, these things are really handy. People are going to love this. Why? Because they're great in an office. They're addictive. So they figured out why, and they did it fairly cheap. So all this stuff, right, to lead you to this one point, and it's that innovating is a creative act. It's a journey. It's an adventure, right? So plan on the unexpected, right? You're doing things nobody's done before. Plan on it. But if you work smart, you can stack the deck in your favor that when the unexpected happens, right, it's not painful failure, but it's essential learning. Thank you.